Okay, hello and welcome to everyone joining us in the US. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar where we're going to talk about our new book, Trend Driven Innovation. So my name is Henry Mason and I'm Managing Director of Trend Watching, and I'm joined here by David Mattin, our Head of Trends and Insights.
Hi everyone.
So what we're going to do here this afternoon, you can see it's evening for us here in London, is we are just going to share with you potentially the biggest article, the biggest idea, sorry, from our new book. So let me just pull up some slides here. So for those of you who are familiar with Trend Watching, which is most of you understand, we of course have built our entire business around sharing with you the latest and greatest trends and innovations. But over the past couple of years, our audiences, spotters, clients, readers, you guys have increasingly challenged us as we do this. You've asked us, where does this trend come from? Obviously, where's it's headed? But also, what does it mean for me? And really often, really crucially, what can I do with this trend? How am I going to act on this trend? So last year, we spent quite a bit of time really pulling together everything that we do, both internally and with clients. And we're really delighted to share this with you, our entire end-to-end trend methodology in the book that you can see in front of you, Trend Driven Innovation. So what we're going to do this afternoon on this webinar is to share with you really perhaps the biggest idea contained within the book. And that is that the counterintuitive secrets to customer centricity lies not in watching consumers themselves, but in watching businesses. And once we've done that, we are going to turn it over to you to ask your trend questions. So you should be able to see the question and answer space on your screen in front of you now. Do feel free to write down any of your big trend questions, right? What are the challenges you face when working with trends? Perhaps working with other people and trying to get them on board with trends. You have us on the line here to try and tackle those questions at the end of the session. So what we'll do, we'll run through the presentation and we will then come back and at the end pick up all of your questions. So do feel free to get them in early and jot them down as we go through. But before we get into the big idea, just want to introduce the rest of the team, because you've met myself and David based here in London. We also wrote the book with a team around the world. So we were joined by Delia, who's based over in Vienna in Austria, and she's actually in the final stages of her pregnancy, so she can't join us on this call today, and we wish her all the very best of luck with that. And we also were joined by our co-author Max, who's actually based over in New York, but unfortunately he has to fly to Dubai tomorrow morning, and he's been struck down with a nasty bug today, and is not able to join us. But of course, if you are based in the US, like most of you are, and you're passing through New York and you want to grab a coffee with him, then do reach out to us and we can arrange that. He'd be delighted to meet you. But unfortunately, he can't join us on this call here today. Right, let's get going. Because I don't think anyone would disagree with us if we suggest that the business environment, the business landscape today often looks and feels a little bit like this. It's overwhelming, it's intimidating, right? There are more competitors trying to capture your customers than ever before. And those very customers are becoming more and more demanding on a daily basis. Right? It's a tough place to do business, the world today, as we all know. But if you strip it all back, right, what are we actually trying to do? And any business person really is trying to answer one fundamental question, and that is, what are my customers going to want next? Right? If you have a good answer to that question, then you don't need to worry about the overwhelming nature of the business environment, because you will be okay. In fact, you'll be more than okay. You'll win, right? You will be successful. So when we went out and thought, let's look at our methodology, let's pull it apart, let's really interrogate it. Right? And we spoke to people that buy our premium service, the people that read our free content, the people that come to our events. And the more we spoke with them, the more we realized that we actually have a fundamentally different approach, and actually quite a radical approach to answering this most fundamental of business questions. And for those of you, of course, who are familiar with trend watching and know our content, you will know that we always illustrate our trends with examples of real-world innovations. Right? These could be new products and services from existing businesses. They could be new startups from coming into the marketplace, or it could be new innovative marketing campaigns. This is what we mean when we talk about innovation. Right? But we believe if there's one secret to trend-driven innovation, if you want to know a radical new approach to answering this most fundamental of business questions, what are my customers going to want tomorrow? You can start to get powerful answers by looking at the businesses that they are lavishing love and attention on today. So before we explore how that is possible and why that is such a powerful approach to answering this question, I want to take a step back and let's start at the beginning with asking ourselves, what do we mean when we talk about trends? Right? Because at Trend Watching, we're looking at consumer trends, and we've defined the consumer trend as a new manifestation among people in behavior, attitude, or expectation of a fundamental human need, want, or desire. Okay, but more interestingly to us than just what a trend is where a trend comes from. Because we believe that you can start to see trends emerge as innovators address people's basic human needs and wants in novel ways. Now that is a very short sentence, but behind it lies all of the elements of our trend methodology. So it's going to take a few moments to really unpack this in more detail, because it really illustrates how we think about trends and how you should think about opportunities. Right? So yes, on the one hand, we live in a world of constant, perpetual, relentless change. Again, every switched-on business professional knows this. Social change, political change, environmental change, technological change, economic change. The pace of change is faster than ever before, and it's only going to get faster. We all know this. But what's so often overlooked is, on the other hand, as people, right, we share certain basic, fundamental, universal human needs and wants, right? And these don't change year on year, decade on decade. They barely change century on century. Right? Think about things like the desire for safety and security, right? The search for social status, the desire to appear attractive and successful to one's peers, the quest for connection. Right? When it comes to consumerism, the desire to get the right product at the right time at the right price, the search for reliable, trustworthy, relevant information. Okay, these things don't just emerge from nowhere, right? They've been with us forever as people. But, and we've touched on this earlier, right, and looking at innovations as the unit of analysis, of course, what does change is new innovations coming into the marketplace on a daily, if not hourly basis now. Right? So that's the third element of our third strand of our model when it comes to trends and innovation. Because when these three elements combine, right, you get something really interesting, because new innovations, of course, either resolve tension amongst consumers around basic needs that are not being satisfactorily met, or they start to create new expectations among consumers about how innovators can serve those basic needs and wants in novel ways, as we discussed. And if you're looking to have this laid out, if you prefer your thinking captured visually, right, laid out diagrammatically, this is how we capture this model in the book, right? And you can see those three elements at play in this image. And because we believe that as an innovator, right, you are looking to land your innovations, your initiatives in that sweet spot. Right? Yes, they need to take account of changes in the external environment, but more importantly than that, they need to cater to people's basic human needs. They need to give people fundamentally what they want, right? And need to focus on resolving any expectation gaps that might exist in the consumer arena. Because the more we spoke to people, the more we kept on coming back to this, and I'm sure you guys, you're all on this call because you intuitively get this, right? You understand this, but tracking trends helps you meet and ultimately surpass consumers' rapidly changing expectations. Okay, wow, you've probably never heard anyone mention expectations. This word expectations, expectations, expectations. We've been hammering you with this concept. So now I'm just going to hand over to David, who's going to walk you through in a bit more detail why this concept of expectations is so fundamental to our model of trends. So David, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Okay, so you've heard from Henry this idea of the innovation as the unit of analysis, this idea that we think you can be empowered to know what your customers will want next by watching innovations in this structured way. So we're looking for those clusters of innovations that set new customer expectations. But there's still really a piece of the puzzle, a piece of our methodology missing, and that is the question, you know, if these expectations are set in an industry or a market or among a demographic that's a million miles away from mine, what have they got to do with me? You know, why should I care? That's a very powerful question. We have a good answer to it. The answer is expectation transfer. And I just want to talk you through that idea now. But expectation transfer at its simplest is what it says. It's just the idea that game-changing innovations, they create new customer expectations, and then those expectations will spread across borders, across industries, across demographics, and they'll eventually spread all the way to your door. And I just want to show you a really powerful example of that. So we all know, of course, what we're looking at. This is Uber, did so much to create this new expectation of one-touch service when it comes to transport. You know, open that app, one touch, and a car's at your doorstep in, you know, 2 minutes, a handful of minutes. So one-touch service when it comes to transport, this new customer expectation. But look now at how that expectation has spread through the consumer arena in the last handful of years. So really quickly, this is the Darty button. Darty is a consumer electronics retailer in France. This is a little physical button that you can stick around your home on any piece of consumer electronics. And if you have a problem with that item, one touch of this button will spark an instant call back from Darty customer services. So one touch for customer service, again, playing into that expectation of one-touch service that Uber did so much to create. We all know this, so I won't linger long. This is the Amazon dash buttons. You know, again, stick these little smart buttons around your home, one touch to order your soap, your washing powder, whatever it is. So that same expectation of one-touch service, this time playing out in online retail. This is Gojek. They're the Uber, essentially, of ojek motorcycle taxis in Indonesia. And in October 2015, we saw them layering on a whole range of other lifestyle services into what they do. So Go Clean, Go Massage, Go Glam, which is about beauty products and beauticians. Gojek understand that this expectation for one-touch service is spreading to all kinds of other industries, all kinds of other lifestyle services, and they are innovating to meet that expectation. So that's one really powerful example of expectation transfer. Uber created this new customer expectation of one-touch service, and it spread across borders, it spread across industries. But expectation transfer doesn't just apply to expectations around products or around services. It also applies to much less tangible aspects of consumerism. Things like, you know, how should a brand behave? How should it position itself? How ethical should a brand be? And I just want to show you one really quick example of that. The trend you're looking at now is insider trading. If you did read our 5 trends for 2016, you'll remember this trend. But insider trading is about saying consumers are looking to brands to make positive internal changes and then shout about them, tell the world about them. And I just want to look at how that expectation has spread through the consumer arena in the last sort of handful of months. So you've heard of this idea from us of the innovation as the unit of analysis. We're looking for those innovations that create new customer expectations. So when we see an example like the one on your screen now, alarm bells really start to ring, because this is an amazingly powerful example. This is the CEO of Intel standing on a stage in 2015 saying the tech industry is woefully undiverse. Everyone we hire tends to be white, tends to be male, tends to be in his 30s. You know, it's not good enough. I am committing $300 million to building a new more diverse workforce here at Intel by 2020. And we're going to be very transparent about how we meet those targets. So you can see within that example the power to help establish a new customer expectation, that brands make positive changes internally and then shout about them, tell the world about them, because people now care much more about what's going on within a brand's four walls, what it does internally, how it treats its people. But just look at how that new expectation, look at how we've seen it spread through the consumer arena in the last handful of months. So this is Grab Taxi Singapore. They're the kind of Uber competitor in Singapore. We know about the big concerns around driver welfare and worker welfare in the gig economy more broadly. So this is Grab Taxi launching a $3 million fund for driver welfare to cover things like accident insurance, medical costs, things like that. So again, playing into that expectation that brands should make positive changes internally and then tell the world about them. This is REI. Love this example. So REI, the outdoor clothes retailer where you guys are in the USA, what they did in October of last year is they said this orgy of consumerism that we see on Black Friday, some of the ugly scenes really we see on Black Friday, do not reflect who we are as a brand or who we want to be. So what we're going to do this Black Friday is we're going to close all 142 of our stores. We're going to give 1,200 staff a paid day off and encourage them to spend that day outside in nature, just enriching themselves, because that's what we believe as a brand. That's who we want to be as a brand. So we're going to turn our back on one of the most profitable trading days of the year. Again, okay, playing into this new emerging expectation that brands make positive changes internally, but then tell the world about them, you know, run a campaign about them, shout about them, because people care much more now. And it just doesn't stop, okay? We saw this recently here in London. So one of the big concerns here in London is the cost of accommodation, the price of rent. So this is Starbucks launching a fund to help its staff meet those costs, to help its staff raise an initial deposit when they want to rent accommodation in London. And I'm sure you can imagine, I mean, we've seen an example with REI, you know, one of the original examples, Intel from the USA, obviously, but I'm sure you guys can imagine and think of lots of contexts that this new expectation that brands make positive changes internally and then shout about it, tell the world about it, how that can be, how that's manifesting itself and how it could be served, you know, where you are in the USA, in your market. And it just doesn't stop, okay? The expectation spreading just doesn't stop, because very recently at the beginning of this year, we see Starbucks in China doing a similar thing. So the cost of living in China is increasingly a huge issue. And this is Starbucks doing something similar, launching a fund to help its staff meet that cost of living. So I've shown you two, I hope, really powerful examples of expectation transfer at work. And expectation transfer, this idea that expectation spread, should lead you in the end to a very powerful, but actually quite scary, scary if you're thinking with your brand hat on, a quite scary question. And that is, who am I as a brand really competing against? Okay, it's not necessarily the people we tend to think about, the people, you know, either side of you in your industry, your direct competitors in your industry. It's not necessarily the people who just happen to be close to you geographically. It actually is those brands, those startups, those game-changing innovations that are creating the new expectations that will eventually spread all the way to your door. Okay, and that is why we are so passionate about this idea of the innovation as a unit of analysis. We're passionate about the idea that if you watch innovations in this structured way, you interrogate clusters of innovations for the new expectations they're creating, then you're empowered to know what your customers are going to expect from you next, right? What they'll want from you next. So that's our methodology in a nutshell. I'm now going to hand back to Henry, who's going to talk for a few minutes on one of the probably the biggest single question that we get asked when we introduce this methodology to our audience and to our clients. So back to you, Henry.
Thanks, David. So as David said, he's now given you a powerful demonstration of why using the innovation as a unit of analysis allows you to answer this fundamental business question: what will my customers want tomorrow, want next? Now, as I said, I'm going to look at one of the most often asked questions of us. But of course, if you have any other questions, right, do feel free to type them into the box, because we will have some time at the end to answer them. So if you've got any other questions that perhaps the presentation is throwing up, do feel free to ask them. But the big question that we want to answer in advance of all that is this, right? Excuse me. People often say to us, okay, so I love the examples that you show to illustrate a trend. Right? I get that, but I have to then go and take these trends to my clients, to my boss, to my team. Right? And how do I answer it if someone says, yes, but you know, these examples that you showed me, some of them failed, right? Some of the other ones weren't huge successes. This wasn't a breakout success. Right? Where does that leave me? Does that invalidate the trend? It's a great question, and I'm just going to answer it with reference to a few cell phones, examples of a few cell phones. Because when we were writing the book, we saw the emergence of, or the release of, the first iteration of the Black Phone, right? Which, as you can see on the screen there, the image, the Black Phone is private by design, right? This is a phone that places encryption at the heart of its proposition. The second phone we saw came out of a crowdfunding project in the Netherlands. And this is a phone called the Fairphone, which, as you might be able to imagine, as you can read from the image, is a phone that places sustainability and ethics at the heart of its proposition. The third phone we saw wasn't even a real phone yet. It was just a video on YouTube. And this was the video of Project Ara. So this is a pilot project from Google to create a modular phone. And what that means is you as the user can slot in and slot out the components that are most relevant to you. So if you really just use your phone to take selfies, put a more powerful camera on the front of your phone. If you are all about listening to music with your friends, put a more powerful speaker in. If you break the screen of your phone, just slide it out and put in a new one. So these three phones, the Black Phone, the Fairphone, and Project Ara, are we saying that these three phones are going to outsell the iPhones of this world? No, we're not. Right? They will not. It's highly unlikely that they will sell millions of units and displace the iPhone and the Samsung phones as the best-selling phones in 2016. But that's not the point. Right? The point is what happens to the expectations that these phones create. Even in the few minutes since I've presented these phones to you, perhaps you're starting to have your expectations shifted. Perhaps you're starting to ask yourself, if there is a Fairphone, does that mean my phone is unfair? Otherwise, why would they call it the Fairphone? Why can't I upgrade the speaker in my phone? So perhaps those are the questions that you're asking. Because, right, and we've seen this happen in action, right? It's not just about whether those phones sell millions of units, but it's about what happens to the expectations and how those expectations that those phones create ripple through the consumer arena. Because we've seen, since the publication of the book, the big manufacturers respond to these expectations. Right? Of course, we all know, we've all been reading about Apple's battle with the FBI, because at the back end of last year, with the release of iOS 9, one of the major features of that new software was Apple massively increased the encryption around the iPhone. So now they can't get access to your data. We've seen Samsung register a patent for a modular camera to go into a phone. So it's not just about the success and failure of these specific phones, it's about the expectations that these phones create. And of course, that never stops, right? The dance of expectations and response never stops. Again, since publishing the book, we've seen just in December last year, this phone launched in Japan, which is a washable phone. Right? Not only is it waterproof, you can actually wash it with antibacterial soap. Right? And just last month at CES in Las Vegas, the world's first phone with a 360-degree camera so that you can take virtual reality enabled footage on your phone. Again, are we expecting everyone to rush out and buy these two phones? No, we're not. But will the expectations that the mere presence of these phones in the marketplace, even among those consumers that don't purchase them, how will they arrive at Apple and Samsung's door? So that's a brief overview of a big idea from us. We started this session by saying that the business arena was a pretty overwhelming place, pretty intimidating place, but that if you knew how to think about those overwhelming forces, you could actually flip them on their head and turn them to your advantage and use them to unlock new opportunities. Right? And of course, if you're talking about trends, if you're talking about innovations, it's almost obligatory to include a Steve Jobs quote, right? Of course, it's a bit cliched, right? But we could not resist because we were just struck by the parallels between what Steve Jobs said and this approach. Because Steve Jobs famously said, I don't believe in market research. I don't need it. Because people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. Okay, and we believe that by looking at what other businesses are showing their customers, you can read what's on those pages and use the insights that you take from doing that to write your own. So, we said this was just a brief overview of the big idea that lies at the heart of trend-driven innovation. But the book Trend-Driven Innovation is bigger than just this idea. So here's the table of contents, right? It contains the complete end-to-end trend methodology, everything you need to become a trend-driven innovator. We start with a look at why trends are more important than ever before. We then move on in Scan to look at how to spot trends and how to structure your trend watching. And that's what we've touched on here this afternoon. Right, then in Focus, we look at how to, if you're spotting all of these trends, how to know which ones are relevant and right for your business and why the answer to that question may surprise you. Then in Generate, we look at how to use those trends to generate actionable, compelling innovation ideas for your customers. Then in Execute, we look at some trend-driven strategies to get those ideas into the hands of your customers. And then finally, in Culture, we look at how to build a trend-driven culture across your organization, how to get everyone on your team on board with becoming a trend-driven innovator and some strategies around how to do that. Right. And of course, like all of the content that we ever put out at Trend Watching, it's deeply grounded in the real world. The book contains over 100 case studies for you to learn from. But it really has one objective, and that is to help you build products, brands, services that people love and ultimately drive the next big trend yourself. So that is a brief overview of what we've been working on. Now it's over to you guys. We do have some time to take your questions. What do you think of this methodology? What are some of the challenges that you face when it comes to working with trends? So we're just going to end the presentation here and go back to the Hangout, where we should be able to pick up your trends. Well, you can see it's got dark here as we get into the evening here in the UK. Okay, so a question from Darrell. How can we apply this to solving human problems? In an era where landfills are filled, seas are gutted with plastic to choke the planet, and people are not being paid a living wage, how can we create things that people actually need and that help people? That is a fantastic question, Dara. I'm really happy you asked this, and it's a great question, and I'm going to hand over to David to answer it, because it is a tough question. But,
well, I mean, it's a brilliant question, and I think that the key is, to look at people's changing expectations around, generated by the innovations, right, the brands that they're engaging with now, and look at where that's pushing things. And clearly, there's a lot there's a lot of expectation movement in the direction of greater transparency, right? There's a lot of movement in the direction of greater awareness of the negative impacts that consumerism has on the planet and other people and on the self, right? On our own selves, our health and our well-being. Okay, if you want to innovate to try to improve those issues, right, to try to make the world a better place, okay, you're going to need to make things that, as you say, the people need or they want to engage with, that helps make things better. So use the methodology we've laid out to do that, okay? Ask yourself, how can I meet these emerging expectations around awareness, around transparency, around sustainability in ways that people will like, in ways that people will actually engage with, right? In ways that makes their lives better, that they want to get on board with, okay? Because you obviously, you can't force these solutions down people's throats, okay? We have to create solutions that people want to engage with. And I think that our methodology empowers you to do that, okay? It doesn't have to just be about making things that people want to buy, okay? Hopefully there's a deeper mission there too.
And I would just add to that, we see, we're not naive optimists, right? And clearly too many businesses just get it so wrong. I mean, look at someone like Volkswagen, right, who lie to consumers and just behave disgracefully, right? So we are not naive optimists about today's reality, but I think we are deeply optimistic about people, right? And as we introduce this methodology, we are totally focused on people's basic human needs and wants. And we are deeply optimistic that, all things being equal, people want products and services that create a better world, right? Create a better society, have a positive impact on their health, society. And, to use one of your examples there, the sea is being gutted with plastic to choke the planet. We see examples, was it Adidas, I think, who created, the range of sneakers actually made out of ocean plastic, right? They partnered with the non-profit to take the plastic from the ocean and create those sneakers. And our point is that once you as a customer see an example like that, and you look at that, you then look at a normal pair of sneakers and it looks woefully inadequate by comparison. And that is a good thing. I mean, we're not there yet, but the more consumers ask those questions of brands and say, if there can be sets of sneakers made out of ocean plastic, why are you giving me sneakers made out of leather stitched by a child laborer on the other side of the world? That is not okay, if now I know that this is possible. So we're huge believers that we are heading in the right direction, not as fast as any of us would like, but let's hope, let's all push ourselves and push the businesses that we deal with to get there. So we have a few other questions, and another question here from Carly. How long does it take something revolutionary, such as Uber, to become a trend within mainstream society? David, do you want to take that?
I mean, there's no, it's a how long is a piece of string question, but the answer is, it's getting faster and faster all the time, okay? Because as we've talked about, I mean, Uber itself is not a trend, but the expectations that it creates of one-touch service, right? Going back to exactly the example we gave, that's the trend. So Uber helps create new expectations that become, essentially a trend that people carry with them through the consumer arena, and that's, that can happen now faster than ever. because we live in such a connected world, you know, because of the global brain, people are exposed to many more products, services, campaigns than ever before. And just as, you know, Henry talked about, they don't have to directly engage with them, they don't have to use them, they just have to see them. And they're seeing more of them, they're seeing them kind of faster at a greater rate than ever. So a new expectation can break into the mainstream much, much more quickly than it used to. I mean, Uber, you know, we talk about Uber as though that's such a well-established thing, you know, what became the trend on demand, but it's, you know, it's a handful of years old. It's not really long, okay? But in the world of consumer trends now, that's very long. So faster than ever is the answer, and that's a scary thing, but it also means that, you know, the opportunities are coming faster than ever. So it's an empowering thing too, I hope.
And then we have another question from Len. How do you differentiate an expectation from a goal? Is the expectation expected from achieving the goal? So I think, just to try and process that, so I think what that's asking is, and Len, do feel free to correct me if we're heading off on the wrong direction there. But I think, you know, are we really substituting the word expectation for values that people hold, right? You know, are we really, you know, saying that this is all about expectations when actually we're just saying, is this about people's goals? And yeah, I would actually agree with you there, right? You know, if you, and I think this is where we believe too many commentators become obsessed. If you think back to our model of consumer trends, having those three elements: basic needs and wants, drivers of change, and then innovations. We feel that too many people are too focused on the innovations and the change, right? That's what everyone gets excited about. And too often, people are left out of it. You know, and we think that we actually, and we share this in the book, we have an entire framework. You know, so when an innovation comes across our desk, we set it against this framework, which is structured by basic human needs and wants. And yes, those are basically goals, right? So one of our mega trends, you know, one of the big things that we're focused on is self-improvement. You know, self-improvement when it comes to health, when it comes to education, when it comes to, you know, fulfillment, right? So we are, yeah, absolutely, we are focused really on what are people trying to achieve, right? Are they trying to achieve connection with their friends and family? Are they trying to achieve personal development? Are they trying to achieve status? Are they trying to achieve health? So I would say that the two things, yes, are very, very linked. But great question, thank you. Okay, well guys, thank you so much for joining us so we could share some of these ideas with you, and thanks for asking some of your questions. As I said, if you want to have any questions that you want to send to us directly or any further clarification, do feel free to just email us. My email is henry@trendwatching.com,
david@trendwatching.com.
keeping it simple. And as we said, you know, unfortunately, Max, who is sitting in New York most of the time when he's not traveling, you know, of course, if you ever want to meet up with him, just feel free. We are expanding in the US as well, and we can't wait to do more with you. But with that, it is over to you guys, really. Like, we're super excited to share this with you. This is how we think, this is how we work. Now, we want to pass it over to you guys and see what you can do with it, right? We would love for you guys to go away and create the next wave of expectation raising innovations, so we have something to write about. So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.